Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast. Presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Josh from MitsuTimes. Today, my guest is Mr. Leon Reitman. He is the owner and driver of a bunch of Mitsubishis, but today we're going to be talking about his Summit that is most commonly seen at the shootout. It's a special vehicle, and not a lot of people really know about him. I mean, early 1G DSMers really love the platform, but I think once you start to get into the younger, the 2G guys, the love for the Summit starts to get lost.
Yeah, it's a very obscure vehicle. One of the most common comments I hear from people is, like, I forgot these things even existed. and it seems to be both the car guys in general. I take it to regular car shows, or even within DSM community, people look at it and they're like, "Oh yeah, where this have been all these years?"
Well,
yeah,
good.
And it's actually kind of funny how another question I get is, what is it like? Is it like a 1G? Is it like a 2G? And it's kind of a mix of both generations. Some things are very much like a 1G, other things are like 2G, and the rear end on those things is completely like nothing out there. It's not like 1G, 2G, or Evo.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't even realize that.
Oh, yeah. It's got its own rear end that I think it takes its evolution from the old Vista vans in the 80s.
Okay.
So it's completely different from anything, which of course complicates things when you want to modify them.
Yeah. Just can't be easy, can it?
It's not. You pretty much have to adapt components from, I like to stick with Mitsubishi parts, but I suppose pretty much any other cars will do, because again, of how different they are in the rear. Mm-hmm. In the front end, they're very much like 1G.
Interesting. So the 1G trans mounts and all that stuff?
Okay, so that's a little weird. In 92, which was the first year for the fan platform. Mm-hmm. It was an oddball year, sort of like the 90 DSMs were.
Okay.
They use different style. They really use 1G style engine transmission mounting scheme, and then in 93 and up, they're just like 2G.
Oh wow, no kidding.
Yeah. So there was this odd change that happened for whatever reason, and they stuck with it. And so basically all the same rules apply. Yes, you use 1G transmission can only be used on 92s, and then 2G transmission can be used on any of them.
Wow, they really had to make it complicated, huh?
Oh yeah. But a lot of the stuff is interchangeable. Like the brakes, you can use DSM brakes, so that's good. They all came just like the Lawns they used to have. They originally come with the full lug hubs. Mm-hmm. So you can. A lot of people, especially in the old days, they like to use Galant VR4 wheels on them.
Oh yeah.
So that was a popular look at for a while. But I kind of want to tell you how I come to race these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how many people remember, but back in the 90s, there was this gentleman, Gus Mahone. Gus was a legend in the turbo 2.2, 2.5 liter Mopar racing cars. I mean, like I said, he's a legend. You mention it to anyone in that world, they know exactly who he was. So Gus was in Connecticut, one state over, and he raced at New England Dragway where we raced. And so he was one of the fastest Mopar guys back in the 90s. So he had turbo caravan minivan that ran 13.3 back in like 95, 96, where that was absolutely unbelievable. You know, just to have an sport compact powered minivan to be that fast. Obviously, his van was a crowd favorite, and as it should have been. But I looked at this and I said, "Hey, wait a minute! You know, if I can put our beloved 4G63 into a minivan, that would be even faster and even cooler." And that's when I conceived the idea of putting 4G63 into a Mitsubishi minivan, which was Eagle Summit was the most common platform. They also came in a Colt Vista, and they also came in Mitsubishi Expo LRV.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it had to be LRV. A regular Expo was the 7-passenger van wagon. So that's how I did all the research, and I realized that hey, 4G63 can be transplanted in this platform. I just now have to find one. And back in the 90s, these vans, they weren't exactly cheap. They were because I also wanted to have all-wheel drive, obviously. And all-wheel drive vans, even used, they were in $15,000-$16,000 range.
Wow.
Yeah, so to pick up that toy back in the 90s just to swap the engine wasn't an easy proposition. So after a quick search for them, I kind of came to a realization that, this would be cool, but they are too expensive right now. Then as the thousands came and they plummeted in price, the other thing that happened is they started all the vans I've been finding, they were all rotted out. As many Mitsubishis, they did not have a great corrosion protection, and these were all made in Japan, and they were not well protected from rust.
Yeah.
And if you wanted for all-wheel drive, you had to find one typically in their rust belt. And so they went from being too expensive to too rusty. And it so happened in 2008, I found one that came up from Arizona, which was really unheard of because down south, not many people would pay extra $2,000 to make these things all-wheel drive. Most of the vans down in the south, they would be front-wheel drive. But someone bought it and kept it in Arizona. It was completely faded. The paint, clear coat, was all faded, but it was completely rust-free. And that was my van. Picked it up, I believe, for like $1,500.
Nice.
And I used it for a couple of years as a minivan. I have 3 kids. I shuttled them around town to soccer games, swim team, dance classes, whatever you do with the minivan. And the idea was always to do engine swap. But at first it ran so well, I didn't want to just take it apart. And then 2 years into it, the clutch started slipping. And I'm like, there you go. That's my opportunity. And I started the swap. The initial plan to make it, I still wanted to keep it as a minivan, and so I would use it. My intention was to make it like a conservative 300 horsepower daily driver.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of my friends pretty much gave me this massive intercooler. It was equivalent of like a Buescher race car. And I did some measurements and I said, hey, this just fits under the original bumper. And it was really this one intercooler that kind of that, well, since I have this much bigger intercooler, now I can make a lot more power and I can make it much more extreme. And from there, it turned into 400 plus horsepower van. But it was kind of like this one chance part that changed the whole core path for the van. You know, it became a much more extreme vehicle, and I'd like to say more fun, but you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Faster can be fast. It can be more fun. It can also be a lot more trouble.
Right. A lot more time under the hood.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, what's the current setup on it?
Current setup is actually, it's a little bit the less extreme. So what's been happening is, let me tell you a little background on it. I wanted this to be a true sleeper. And so the body is 100% stock, minus some intercooler holes in the front. But, so body stock, and I kept stock exhaust. It's just under 2-inch exhaust, which all you needed for 140 horsepower minivan. But I have a 3-inch downpipe, electronic cutout, and then stock exhaust. So when the cutout is closed, it is pretty loud vehicle. I'm sorry, quiet vehicle. It's a little bit louder than completely stock exhaust, but it's nowhere near what it becomes when you open the 3-inch header downpipe.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it is really obnoxiously loud or very quiet. There's nothing in between. And one of the problems, I often get asked the question, well, how much horsepower does it make with the exhaust closed through the original exhaust? And I actually, one day I spent I had it on a dyno, and with exhaust closed, it makes 280 horsepower no matter what I do. I can increase the boost. I can give it, play with the air-fuel mixture. I can play with timing. Doesn't matter. 280 horsepower is an absolute bottleneck, and you just cannot make more than that through original exhaust. And it makes sense. It's got resonators, it's twists and turns, and all with the 2-inch tubing.
Oh yeah, it is really narrow, huh?
Right. With exhaust open, my power would go, that day on the dyno, it was doing consistent 420s.
Wow.
And you close the exhaust right down to 280-ish. And so the other problem I encountered, I autocross it, I drag race it, and I also do oval racing with it. And what was happening is, for autocross, the venue we're in, they would not allow me to keep the exhaust open because of they have noise limitations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so unfortunately, after I made a couple of passes with exhaust open, and they're like, "Hey, you have an option to shut it off, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Please shut it off, because you're making too much noise." And the neighbors to the venue, they get it, they complain, and we're gonna lose this venue if we have cars like yours there. Like, all right, understood. I kept it closed. Unfortunately, at the time I had Force Performance Red Turbo. That's what I made 220 horsepower. Oh, sorry, 420 horsepower.
Yeah.
And it was a great turbo, but with that tiny exhaust, I could not launch it. I could not spill up the turbo through that exhaust and then still launch it. It would basically constantly bog down. So I kind of came to realization, if I want to have decent spool up, I have to have a smaller turbo for autocrossing. So right now I have old school 20G turbo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's got great spool up, works well with that super restrictive exhaust, and it still makes pretty good power on the top end. Probably closer to like high 300 horsepower range rather than low 400.
Wow. So it's the 20G is unloved, underappreciated because it's got the perfect spool and the perfect street pull ability. I mean, it's a great turbo.
Absolutely. Oh, I mean, I would go a step farther, and I would say that 16G, be it small, big, or Evo, that is a turbo that is perfect turbo for probably 90% of people out there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and 20G is just a little bit bigger than the 16G. It's not a huge step up. And then, of course, instead, what we end up with is a much larger turbo that are greatly underutilized.
Yeah.
To that, and I'm going to quickly step aside since we're talking small turbos. For a little while in early 2000s, I kept that 14B record for quite a few years, and it was just a fun thing. One day I built a new engine and I threw a 14B on the engine just to kind of like a break-in turbo, because I figured, a fresh engine still has contaminates through it. And before I put my big 20G turbo, I'm going to put a 14B. And what I noticed back then, like, holy crap, 14B is a quick turbo on the built motor. And I took it to the track, ran 12.0, and then I was like, wow, this is great. So for a while there, I played around with 14B. But yeah, I am definitely a big believer of you take a small turbo and then you go above, max it out, and then some. And I truly believe it's a much better approach, much easier approach. You break fewer things. It's easier to drive. You can let off the throttle. When you have a big turbo and you let off the throttle, you lose all the boost and the turbo has to spool up again. Yeah. Well, that's a huge waste of time. And lost time is going slow at the trip. So I'm a big believer in the small turbos.
Yeah, I think we say it all the time on here, but it's a shame that the trend these days is to go straight to a 6.4, 6.6 or something along those lines, and not make your way through the bolt-on turbos and feel how great those turbos are.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, the other thing we got to keep in mind is these days DSMs are not daily drivers for most people. It's usually a hobby car, weekend car, or something like that. So it's a little more understandable these days, but we all lived through the era where people daily drove cars on turbos that they really had no business of having.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. All right, Leon, so is there something in particular that drew you to these different van platforms, or is it something that you just wanted after you saw that Chrysler one, you just knew you wanted to get a Mitsubishi one and swap it?
Yeah, that was my biggest motivation. And so I mentioned earlier that another type of racing I've done was the spectator drags.
Right.
That's been a very upcoming sport, if you will, which is kind of funny because it's not supposed to be a sport that's supposed to be spectators just bring whatever they drove to the track, and but of course, as it is with anything, it's sort of becoming a sport of its own. The spectator drags cars, the top competitors have absolutely insane vehicles that are set up just for the oval racing, and it's evolved. But I did that with a DSM. I was one of the first people who brought an import car to that event and
Nice.
started beating the big V8s because they were definitely the favorites, and and so my talent originally was that unusual car. People laughed at it, and the first event I went to, they kept pulling me over. Their rule was no nitrous, and they could not believe that an import can be that fast. And so they kept checking my car for nitrous. So they pulled me over. The whole tech team converged on it, and they're like, "You've got nitrous." And the other funny part is we heard it. Well, of course, what they heard was a blow-off valve.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
they were convinced that was nitrous, and they were under the car. They were convinced I was hiding nitrous setup, and obviously I didn't. I've never used nitrous, and they had to let me race, and so it was great. It was really great to have this car that was unusual for that type of racing, and also very successful.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, after people started seeing, like, hey, all-wheel drive DSMs can do so well, and you start seeing 3000 GTs, the other DSMs showed up, and I kind of got out of that sport for a while when I sold my green machine, and so my motivation was like, hey, let's bring this minivan. These people thought that Eagle Talon was something. Well, I wonder what they think for bringing a minivan to this event. And so I started racing with this minivan. And the other thing that started happening, I started blowing my motors.
Wow.
And I didn't realize what was happening at first. And it took me 2 engines to figure out what was happening. But the Spectator Drags, it's an oval race. It's an oval race and all you do is you make a left turn.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, oil pickup is on the left side of the engine. So when we enter the left turn, we starve our engine of oil.
Oh, because it's all sloshed to the right.
It all sloshes to the right. Now, I never had this problem with DSMs, but on the van, I lost 2 motors. And what I realized was happening because of high center of gravity and the lack of upgraded sway bars, it swayed to the right, and therefore making the starvation problem that much worse. And so that was a realization that I didn't quite, when I blew my first built motor, I just thought, I didn't, what I would normally do, I would just overfill the oil before the event, and
mm-hmm.
I kind of wrote it off as, well, I guess maybe I didn't put enough oil. I should have put 2 extra quarts instead of 1, that type of and I put a replacement engine in, which was just like a junkyard motor. We still had those back then. And this time I really overfilled the oil, and I had exact same failure. Number 1 bearing spun, broad bearing spun.
Wow.
Yeah, and same failure. And then I kind of realized that, wait, I am running out of oil. Yeah, even after I overfilled it. So I mitigated by doing a couple of things. I added a Moroso oil pan to it, which has higher capacity and an extra quart of oil with a little trap door that's hidden there until you start running out of oil there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I haven't. I've raced it in that configuration, and it seemed to have fixed the problem. But what I have to say to anyone who is racing DSM motor in that type of racing, either get a AccuSump system or dry sump, or at the very minimum, a Moroso oil pan. It's an absolute must for that type of racing, or you have a very high probability of starving an engine of oil. And if they change the direction of race, if they go clockwise, DSMs are born for that. But left turn, which is what the whole NASCAR thing is, DSM is not well suited. However, if you have an Evo 4 and up, they obviously have an engine flipped around, and they're also great for it. But yeah, so getting back to my van, that was my. And by the way, the track I go to, it's an old school NASCAR type crowd there. Absolutely hate anything that was less than 8 cylinders. And that crowd absolutely loved the minivan.
Oh, wow.
Because again, it was such an oddity that there's this minivan that launches like bat out of hell and beats most of the cars off the line, and they're trying to catch up, and some do, but most don't. Because when you get right down to it, it is still a minivan. It still has a lot of roll, and the handling through the corner is definitely not there. It's not as good as DSMs. It's not as good as a lot of other cars that are set up for these oval races. And so what happens is I really have to slow down at the apex of the turn. If I don't, I'm gonna get pushed out. The understeer will push me out.
Oh, okay.
So I have to slow down. And so what happens is if somebody's going behind me, I was actually one time, one of the F-bodies, Camaro, he rear-ended me. And then accused me of brake checking him. And because I slowed down so much at the apex in order to maintain my control coming out. And I'm like, look, I did not brake check you. I have to slow down in this corner in order to make it. But yeah, that was and in that particular case, he got disqualified because he rear-ended me and spun me out.
Jeez.
Yeah, that was good times. Unfortunately, I mean, I know he didn't do it on purpose. He just didn't expect me to slow down that much, and it still was on him because I have to slow down. And if you see that type of racing, most all-wheel drive cars have to slow down a little more than rear-wheel drive cars do. And then of course the strategy for them is don't go behind the all-wheel drive car because they'll force you to slow down and you'll never catch up to them coming out of the corner because they can accelerate. All-wheel drive cars can accelerate out of the corner, whereas rear-wheel drives really can't because they're at the limits of their traction. Yeah. And if they try to accelerate out of the corner, they spin out immediately.
So how did the other racers feel about getting beat by a minivan?
Oh, well, so the thing about racing a minivan is you are in no lose situation because if you lose, you're driving a minivan. So no one expected you to win, and if you beat them, you basically embarrass the other car. So in many ways, that was kind of like. This became kind of an addiction for me. Mm-hmm. When I first started racing the van, I was at the track, a local track, New England Dragway. I was out there racing it just about every other Wednesday night, whenever I had an opportunity. Because here's the thing: you go to a car show with a minivan, and people are laughing at you. Like, what the hell? Who is this loser who brought that minivan? Yeah, what's he doing here? Of course, if somebody takes a minute to learn what it is, they're blown away by it.
Right.
But I would say at a typical car show, there might be 5 to 10% of people who actually notice what that is and recognize what it is. Once they do, it's like I get comments. That's my favorite vehicle here, and I get. But unfortunately, most people don't take time to learn what that is. They just laugh it off and they keep going. When you are at the drag strip, everybody sees what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And then so every time you made your pass, you park it, there's a crowd of people because people want to learn what that is. They saw it in action. So basically, I like to say it like it's sort of like a superstar at the drag strip and a homely minivan at a car show. So, but like I mentioned, it becomes addictive because, well, you wanted to be a superstar. So you end up going to the drag strip, maybe a little more than you should, but because it's so much fun, it's so well received by, and again, people who hate imports, they hate sport compacts, they love it because it's such an oddity. It's a minivan that is really fast.
Yeah, that is true. Even people who have a hatred towards a certain brand or certain whatever, even if it's something rare, you take a second look at it.
Absolutely.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So when you got this one from the guy in Arizona, and you took ownership of it, what kind of condition was it in?
As I mentioned before, it was complete. It had the typical Mitsubishi clear coat fade, which was a combination of it being a Mitsubishi and being in Arizona most of its life.
Yeah.
So it was faded. There was no rust whatsoever. And other than that, they needed some basic maintenance done. Suspension was worn, so I immediately converted it to Evo 8 KYB suspension. Basically, I used the technique that DSMers do to adapt, and specifically the lawn crowd. They like to upgrade their suspension using Evo 8 suspension. You end up with something that rides absolutely terrible in terms of comfort because Evo KYB suspension was not by any means comfortable, but it handled pretty well, and so I did that. My radiator split. I got Evo 1 radiator, which was I adapted it with minimal amount of modifications. So I've done things like that. So it handled well. It had very good radiator, but otherwise it was 2.4 naturally aspirated 5-speed minivan, and it was fun just to shuttle kids around. Until, of course, it was time to do what I really wanted to do with it.
So those have the bench seat and then another row behind that, right?
Okay, no. Okay. So these, first of all, of course, there's always argument. What is it? Is it a minivan? Is it a wagon? Is it a station wagon? The bottom line is they don't fit anything.
It's its own thing.
It's its own thing. And I like to call them a van because they do have a sliding door only on the passenger side, because early 90s and 80s minivans, they all had one sliding door. That's before they realized that the soccer moms also want a sliding door on their side. So before that happened, this is a true form, late 80s, early 90s minivan. One sliding door, and it has bench seat that is removable. It is ridiculously heavy. It's got latches, and before Chrysler had stow and go type configuration. Well, you had a bench seat that came out of the van, and that's what this has. It's got a bench seat that comes out. It weighs 72 pounds.
Wow.
Which is not light. And so I always laugh that they expected, a housewife to remove that seat. That's a little extreme. But so whenever I try to make like a run that I cared about, I would remove that seat because it's not stripping the car because it's an option of the car. You can remove the seat using factory latches. You have a lot of cargo space in there when that happens.
I was going to say, you can make your own little cargo van.
Exactly. That's what it ends up being.
Wow.
And it's got full carpet in there underneath. And in fact, when I first started bringing it to the shootout, I had it in a stock appearing class. And I remember David Busher, I asked him, I'm like, hey, he said the rear seats have to be in. I'm like, hey, what if I have a seat that comes out by design? And David was a little confused by that question. He's like, what are you talking about? And then when you saw the van at the shootout, he's like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Now I get it, yeah.
Yeah. And then he goes, yeah, you can take it out because I have a full carpet under it, and it's just a removable seat.
Don't need to take any bolts out.
No. And by the way, that seat makes an awesome couch in your pit area.
Oh,
it's very
perfect.
It's that doubles as a lounge.
They really
space.
Thought of everything.
Exactly.
That's cool. Well, when you first picked it up, I know you already had some racing aspirations at that point. Was there any goals that you had in mind to that you wanted to accomplish with this thing?
Yeah. So I live, as I mentioned before, in the area where New England Dragway is a local track, and they are draconian regarding roll bar rule. Basically, you have one chance to run under 11.5, and after that, you don't want to go under the rule. But once they warn you not to do it, you don't want to do it, and I certainly don't want to be banned from that track. So my goal was always to run it 11.5. I kind of figured, hey, when I go to the shootout, I can tune it up to run faster. But 11.5 was the goal, and it's been running consistent high 11s, mid 11s. 11.5, 11.6, and it is where I wanted it to be. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to bring it to Ohio and run low 11s, which that's really the most I'd want to do, because once you get into a 10s with the DSM manual transmission platform, you're really asking for trouble. So many things start breaking. And the other thing I want to kind of back up a little and talk about the rear end on these vans. If you look at the axles and construction, they are equivalent to DSM 3-bolt rear end.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And the conventional wisdom in DSM world is, well, if you want to run faster than 13s, you got to upgrade to 4-bolt rear end. And even then, people were breaking the 4-bolt rear end once they get into 11s or 10s. And I know I'm going to regret saying it, but I have, without exaggeration, probably over 300 launches on my rear end. I've never broken an axle.
No kidding. Holy cow.
Yeah, I have. I always, whenever I went to Ohio, I always had a spare axle with me. And somehow this van is not breaking axles. Now, I know that it's not necessarily the launch that kills it, but it's the wheel hop. And I've trained myself, if the moment I feel any amount of wheel hop, I lay off the throttle or press the clutch because it's wheel hop kills drivetrains, And if it's gonna snap your axle or transmission or rear transfer case, it's a wasted run anyway. So basically, that's how, whenever I feel any wheel hop, I lay off. And up until now, not a single broken axle. I know I hate saying it because, but at this point, after 300 plus launches, I think I can say it, If I break it at this point, I'm well overdue.
Yeah, for sure. You're owed one at this point.
Exactly. And like I said, I have a pair of axles with me in the garage to replace them.
That's awesome. So we talked about the 14B, the 20G, a couple of FP turbo bolt-on turbos. Was there any other setups that you've had on it?
Well, yeah. So I on this van, I started with 14B. It ran like a 12.5 on 14B. Then I put 16G and I ran like a 12.2 on it. Then I switched. I ran a 20G. I think I broke into 11s on 20G. Then for a while I had Force Performance Green, which was just the unknown turbo that I put on. I had no history on it, and it kind of that turbo seized on me at the shootout one year.
Oh.
And but I'm like, you know what? It's not blowing. It's not blowing smoke. I actually drove it from Ohio back to Massachusetts, 700 miles in non-turbo mode, because I just figured, hey, why not? If it's not spinning, it's not dumping oil. And actually, I got a better fuel economy, as you would expect, driving it in non-turbo mode. And then after that, I got a Force Performance Red, and most of my so with green, I got into 11/8, and then with the red, I had FB red for most of my best runs. I ran 11.6, 11.5. That was all done with the the FP red. So I had pretty much the whole spectrum of Mitsubishi turbos you can think of.
Wow. You can review them all and tell us which one you like the most.
Yes, I could. Definitely could.
That's awesome. I mean, a lot of people don't have that experience. They either go from a 14B to a FP red or black, or go from the green to the black or something like that nowadays. So that's really cool.
Right,
you've kind of tried them all.
Yeah, no, I tried them all, and then again, as I mentioned earlier, right now the van is in autocross mode, which it has a 20G turbo in it, and again, it's full for spool up, and I haven't decided what I'm going to do for this shootout yet. First I have to decide which one of my cars I'm going to bring, and then once I decide on that, which trip I'm going to bring it in. And I like to, one of the classes everyone's seen me racing at the shootout was max effort. And so basically it's a combination of autocross and drag strip. They combine the time together.
Yeah.
And the van's been actually doing pretty well. The first time I took it down there in that class, it actually took third place.
Oh, wow.
Max effort. Yeah, and that was that was kind of a cool accomplishment to do that with a minivan.
I think I still have a lot of pictures of you when they did the autocross on the other side of the track.
Yeah. That's where it started out. It was on that side. Yeah.
That was a lot of fun over there. I mean, the new course is great too. It was just fun to kind of see. You got to be closer to all the turns, I guess.
Well, the summit side, where the far side, when the autocross was there, it was, I want to say, it was an unsafe autocross because that area is so wide open. It was you would, especially with the crazy powered DSMs and Evos that we had out there, people would hit third gear in autocross, and autocross is not meant to be that fast. The idea behind autocross is you go out there, you go all out, and if you spin out, if something happens, neither you nor your car or anyone else around you gets hurt. And I watched the video from 97 autocross. So not only was it crazy, stupid fast, but you see spectators sitting like maybe 30 feet away from there. And I'm like, oh my God, if any of those cars would have spun out, they would have wiped out that entire crowd of people sitting there on the picnic tables and chairs. I'm like, yeah, so the autocross on that side, it was not safe. So it was fun. It was fun to watch or participate in. It was not safe. What we're doing, so you combine that, a lot of autocross, DSM autocross participants, they were they were not regular autocrossers. They were people who just would do it once a year, if that often. And you put them on a course that was way too fast. There was a kind of a recipe for disaster, and we were so lucky nothing happened there. Where we have it there, it's a very tight course, very small, but it's much slower and therefore much safer.
Yeah.
And by the way, and then if I can put a plug for that event, it is still a lot of fun. And people who, and you never get an opportunity to go to autocross and not work. Autocrosses where you don't work, you usually pay $150, $200. So at the shootout for $70, you can race in autocross where you don't have to work. That's unheard of. It's awesome. A bargain. People should try it. You want to try out autocross for the first time, do it at the shootout because it's a great opportunity.
That's awesome. I love that event, and I wish more people would do the max effort just because it seems so cool. You get a little bit of everything.
Absolutely, yes. And the classic now is, DSMs and Evos. Actually, all Mitsubishis. They all be in the same class, and you see what's still winning. It's still DSMs usually take. Actually, I'm going to take it back. I think Evos might be in their own class.
I think they started last year, being in their own class.
Yeah.
And then I think there's
anyway,
separate front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive now, right?
It changes from event to event, so it's tough to say for sure. But the bottom line is, fun event. Combine. Especially if you have a drag car that's fast enough, it can really cover up your deficiencies in the autocross course. Especially since that autocross course is so short, the difference between the best car and the worst car on the autocross is not that great, and so the drag racing really helps you out, being fast in there. So it's definitely a fun event, and I want to encourage anyone who's listening, try it out, and you can you could catch the bug. And what it does, it also kind of forces you to build a nice all around car. It could be a drag car, but then you keep and DSMs naturally are pretty good at that. A drag setup for DSM is not that different from than the autocross setup. So just don't go with too big of a turbo. That's the one thing I will recommend.
Keep it smaller.
Yeah, stick on the small. And it goes back to what I like to do. I like to keep smaller turbos.
Yeah. I think my 2G might be a little bit too much, but I also think that my daughter, my middle daughter, she has a OZ Lancer. I was like, man, that would be so fun just to put that in max effort. So that's what we might do this year, just to have some more fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that could be a lot of fun.
So, Leon, I want to go back in time a little bit to when this
Yeah.
thing broke into 11s for the first time. Which turbo of the different setups did you have on it then?
So I broke in. I believe it was either 20G or green, FP green. I honestly don't remember. It's I kind of go back in my posts. That's a social media or forums are kind of good for record keeping for
Yes,
me, because
absolutely.
sometimes I forget it. But yeah, and my home track, New England Dragway, you can just see your time off the corner of your eye. So usually you can if you ran 11s for the first time, you see it's 11 something.
Mm-hmm.
So usually you're doing a lot of celebrating for the last shutdown area, because you usually can catch the gist of what you ran.
So how did it feel to get that 11?
Oh, it felt awesome. It was like I said, it was a lot of celebrating, and again, when you get back, everybody's seated and like, did that minivan just ran 11s? And what I hear a lot of times when I see videos of my van taken from the crowd, I always hear that the crowd reaction is really one of the best things about it. And unfortunately, since I'm usually driving it, I never get to experience it. Other than if whoever's taking the video is astute enough to kind of get people's reaction around them. But that's usually a lot of fun.
That's cool. Do you remember was it at the shootout or was it maybe at the local track?
No, that was at the local track.
Okay, maybe you set that
Yeah,
up.
yeah. I have ran my my best at a shootout, and for a while there, for almost a year, my best time happened at the shootout.
Nice.
It's always been a lot of fun, and one of the things I was able to do in Ohio, I gave at the time my son was like 12 or 11, and I gave him a ride in the Summit. I think I didn't go all out. I ran like I want to say it was high 12s run, because I just wanted to take it easy a little. But it was kind of funny. I was asking track officials, I'm like, what's your policy on children in the van? And the guy literally tells me, well, if you have a little baby and you put it in a 7-second dragster, we wouldn't like that. I'm like, all right, so I guess a 12-year-old in a minivan should be fine. And the guy goes, oh, yeah, that's fine. So, yeah, that was another good memory, having my kid in the car. Because obviously to do that at a local track would never be allowed.
Yeah.
So that was definitely fun. And again, I was being reasonable about it.
Right.
I took it easy. But then again, a 12-second or even 11-second DSM is incredibly stable at the track. It's really, you're not taking many chances doing it.
Yeah, for sure. This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by the Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo Club. The Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo Club is a club of 2008 and up Lancer owners who have or are interested in turbocharging their Lancers. There's also Ralliart and Evo owners as well. The Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo Club is a gold mine of technical knowledge, helpful resources, and expert information for safely and successfully adding a turbocharger to your Lancer. It is without a doubt one of the coolest and largest Facebook Mitsubishi communities, with nearly 6,000 members from all over the planet. They share builds, time slips, dyno sheets, and there's even a classified group for you to find parts for your Lancer. Join the club on Facebook at Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo Club and give them a follow on Instagram. So, Leon, you think if you could go back and do this build all over again, you would do it the same, or is there something that you might change?
Honestly, I probably wouldn't change much. The one project upgrade that I have is I have Evo clutch rear end
Mm-hmm.
that I'd like to, because right now it still uses open rear end.
Wow.
So I would love to get a limited slip Evo rear end. And of course, those are tunable. You can adjust just exactly how much limited slip you get out of them. So that is one thing I kind of, like I said, I have the parts. There's some custom machining that has to happen to make that reality. Probably would have done it earlier, because that's one thing I kind of wish. But then again, I'm a little hesitant because whatever's happening with my rear end there, and I'm not breaking axles. If I'm going to all of a sudden start breaking axles, then that I might regret doing it. But yeah, that's one thing I'd like to do, because I figured that'll definitely do better traction off the line, and can improve autocross performance a little, and also drag strip performance.
Hmm.
So that would be about the only thing. And of course, I would mitigate the oil starvation at the oval tracks. That hurt, losing two motors.
Right. Yeah.
First one was a built motor too.
Oh.
And yeah, it fed elements through the oil, and it blew a turbo on me too. So yeah, that was a costly mistake, especially when it happening in the middle of this race season.
Yeah.
It's tough to recover from that.
Get you right in the pocketbook.
Yeah, that, and just race time. It takes you a couple of months to recover from something like this, and a couple of months in the middle of a race season, which is only like 5 to 4 months.
Oh yeah.
It's not fun. But yeah, no. Otherwise, I will. So I do want to mention something.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I thought I was being all clever back in the 90s, coming up with this concept. Take the Mitsubishi minivan, stick in it a 4G63 engine, and have a turbo DSM like minivan. And then, of course, in this day and age, everybody is aware. Well, Mitsubishi did that.
Mm-hmm.
So in these days, most common turbo vans are JDM imports. Parallel to us, back in the 90s, Mitsubishi stuck this 4G63 into both the vans with a sliding door and the Chariot. Chariot was the 7-passenger version of what we had.
Oh, okay.
Right. So they did that. So even though I came up with the idea on my own, I wasn't that original, because Mitsubishi's done that. There's an OEM option. So today, summits or expos, they're tough to come by. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of them, what you see, are JDM imports. And if you can stand the right-hand drive, and then having the sliding door on what would normally be driver's side in our market, then that's an option. So you don't have to build these things; you can buy them. And the turbo versions, they came already with a stronger rear end. By that I mean they're equivalent of the 4-bolt DSM rear ends.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, there is a OEM options. I mean, they're pricey. The good turbo versions, because they came also non-turbo. The non-turbos you can buy relatively cheap. Turbo ones are more expensive, But, there is an option. You can buy one of those. If you start breaking parts, well, that's not that bad of a thing because you can, for the most part, you can replace them with GSM parts. So unlike, you see people import GTRs, the 30 R32 and R33,
Yeah.
and nobody wants to race them. You almost never see them raced because people are horrified at breaking apart. Well, these vans, you can actually replace parts. You can actually have some fun with them. Of course, transmission, the manual transmission for them, it's like for all the DSMers. We're out of parts.
Yeah.
But those also came with automatics, and that's a strong automatic transmission that you can have some, So if I was building a fast van right now, I would pick with an automatic JDM import. It's most of it is already there. I don't know much about automatics themselves, but from what I understand, you can upgrade it using. It's basically the same transmission as the DSM transmission, as a 2G DSM transmission.
Okay.
So a lot of upgrades work, but you guys have to go out do your own research because I'm not an automatic guy. But now with manual parts being impossible to get, anybody who's racing a DSM synchro transmission in 11s or even 9s, they're just asking for trouble. Because, what do you do when you break it? Obviously, there's a dog box, but that's a whole different game.
Yeah, then you're talking tens of thousands of dollars then.
Well, that and, it's not very streetable.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So so there's this whole market, and so one of the things I do is I, back in the, I'd say about 10 years ago, I was on all the forums, all the van-related forums. There's quite a bit of following for these vans down under. Both New Zealand and Australia has a huge fan base. Yeah, because they discovered the JDM vans way back in the 2000s, and they did not have limitation that 15 year or 25 year import limitation. So they started importing those vans way back then, and they've been racing them down there. So there's some amazing vans that are built both in Australia and New Zealand. So I was on their forums, and then very big following in the Philippines and Indonesia. They have quite a few of these vans. But then what happened is I started Summit and RVR and Expo Tuners Facebook group.
Oh, nice.
And I invited guys from Australia, from Philippines, and so we have a nice mix of enthusiasts who all are into modifying them. We don't have a whole bunch of. We are also a resource for people who don't modify them. But if you modify them, that's a good Facebook resource for people. You can learn a lot more about these vans and different markets. The guys from Down Under, they have been incredible resource for us. Sending parts. I know it's expensive to ship parts, but there's a number of guys there whom you can trust, and they part out these vans, and so that's been kind of a source for JDM parts that coming all the way from Australia.
Keeping them on the road.
Yeah, there's several trustworthy guys down there who've been hooking up us in United States.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Leon, what is it about this van that keeps you motivated to keep going with it?
Well, I really want to say it's the people's reaction to it. You know, everybody loves it. It's sort of like it's a platform that once people learn what it is, and again, at the drag strip, there's no question they see it. It's the people's reaction. You know, it's overwhelming positive, and that feeds you to do more of it.
Yeah,
So
I get that.
And like I said, now this is kind of like we got a second chance to life, and if you will, with all the JDM imports, people discovering them and importing them, and it we went from just having a handful of remaining vans in this country to a whole other market of new vehicles coming in.
That's awesome. So what are your goals for 2024 with this van?
Let's see. Like I said, at this point, looks like I will bring it to the shootout, and I don't know, maybe throw the FP Red back on it, and then maybe since I can have my exhaust open, I can actually spool it a little better for autocross.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely makes it a better option for racing it at the shootout. So I think I might put a FP Red back on it and maybe see if I can set some low 11s times with it.
That'd be nice.
So that would be a good reachable goal to do with the van.
Maybe we'll have some good DA, because I know it fluctuates. Sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes it's optimal.
Right.
So do you have any long-term goals with this van, Leon?
Well, I mean, not really. I mean, I don't want to put a cage in it,
right?
Because I think it could kind of ruin it.
Oh yeah.
And I've had race cars with cages, and it's just not worth it. So aside from having some bonsai runs at the shootout, not really. I mean, kind of happy where it is.
Just
I feel like you just enjoy it. Yeah. If I try to, I mean, every now and then I look at it and I'm like, oh man, how cool would it be to get it into 9s? And then I have to catch myself and say, I'm like, well, no, let's not do that.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in 9s. I know what it takes, and yes, the idea of it is quite appealing, but the reality of it, the vehicle stops being a fun vehicle.
Right, take the fun out of
it. Yes, exactly. It's great for the track, but the van is the van. You know, I want to take it to car shows and the electronic, pulling in, sounding like, especially when you have a big turbo whining as you're pulling in, and people look at it like, what the hell is this?
Yep.
You know, I can sound like a 9-second car without being one.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about some of your other Mitsubishis briefly. I know you've had more than an episode's worth of Mitsubishis, and we'll save that for another episode. But give me a quick rundown so people kind of get the idea of what kind of passion you have for these cars.
Well, to kind of give you an idea, my first DSM I bought when I was in college in 1991. That's how far back my passion for DSMs goes. Fortunately, when I was in college, I didn't discover what these cars truly were, like how fast you can make it. Had I found that out, I feel like my academic performance would have been worse in college because it would have been a huge distraction at the wrong time of in my life. So it's a good thing I didn't know how fast they really were.
Absolutely.
So I had a 100% stock DSM all through college, and I sold it in '93 when I graduated college. So after that, most people know my green machine. That was the fluorescent green, faded to stock green Talon. It was an autocross and drag car. That was a very prominent car at the shootout for many years. Then after that, I raced. Bruce Quartler had Mark Holman's old '92 car.
Mm-hmm.
I tuned it and raced it for Bruce. Bruce preferred to just be I guess you like to watch his car from the stands. There's something to be said about that. So I did that for a few years, and that was a very successful car. Bruce and I had a lot of fun with it, and then switched over to this van. That was also a lot of fun. I built all-wheel drive Spider convertible.
Oh, nice.
That I had that at the shootout for a couple of shootouts. It was never a fast car. It ran 12.9 and a 16G turbo. That was a 100% autocross build car, and actually placed, I believe, twice, at least once in the DSM autocross class.
Oh, nice. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun car. And then, all throughout all these years, it's not a DSM, it's Triumph TR7.
Oh.
Most people don't realize, but most people think Triumph only makes motorcycles, and that no, they actually started out making cars, and then they made them both for many, many years. And they made the little convertibles for the most part. They had some other cars too, but never in US. I always wanted to I loved Triumph, and back in around 2000, I wanted to build rear-wheel drive DSM powered car.
Mm-hmm.
I considered the Miata, considered the Z3, and this TR7. It was a car I picked up in California. So I bought a car sight unseen back in 2001. That was before people used to do that a lot. But I bought it. The guy was 100% honest with me. So that's my long-term project. I got it running last summer.
Oh, nice.
And it kind of became a joke in my local DSM club, which is New England DSM, because, it was going on 20 years plus,
mm-hmm.
and it was still not done. And I always talked about it a lot. And so again, it became kind of a joke, because everybody was convinced I'll never finish it. And I was convinced that I will not be one of those guys that has a project that they never finished.
Good.
And last summer, I got it running, 22 years since I started it. So I actually had it at the shootout 2023. I did not race it there, but I drove it around, and it was well received. But honestly, most DSMers didn't know what to do about this car. And but that's kind of like my other big term, long-term project that takes a lot of my time as well.
Okay, that sounds really exciting. I'm going to check that thing out.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to stalk your Facebook or something. So, if someone out there they're listening, they're just picked up a summit or an expo or a Colt Vista, what advice would you give them for their build so they can be as successful as possible?
Well, a couple things. Obviously, join the Facebook group. Unfortunately, forums were a much better platform for build projects and things like that. But unfortunately, forums are gone, essentially. There's just not enough traffic. And so, unfortunately, by default, we're kind of stuck with Facebook. But at the same time, the group I've created, and there's a lot of resources there. A lot of people who've done it in different methods.
Right.
Anything from starting with GDM RVR to starting it with the Summit. We have some people who working with the old vans as well. So I would say do that. And the other thing is stick to proven DSM recipes.
Yeah.
Don't try to do things on your own. I don't know how many times we've seen it in DSM world. People would come into DSM world with the previous experience in whatever it is that they came from, and they can be very competent mechanics and enthusiasts. But when they want to do it on their own, their way, almost always it ends with a disaster of some sort. Then, 2, 3, 5 years later, they abandon DSM with very bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so my advice to people who both the vans and DSMs, learn from other people's mistakes and do it by use the established recipes. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, because you will. I'm not going to say you're necessarily going to fail, but you're definitely taking the difficult path. So stick to what's worked.
I like that advice. I think a lot of times people are like, well, a lot of people, no one's ever tried this. Well, there's probably a reason.
Yeah, right. There is a reason, and I mean, honestly, at this point, there's just so many things. Pretty much anything you're thinking of, somebody tried it, and if people are not doing it at this point, then they found a problem. And I guess sometimes people look down on leveraging other people's designs. I'm like, no, that's not being lazy. It's truly more efficient.
Yep.
See what mistakes other made. Don't repeat them.
Absolutely. So, Leon, you talked about it a little bit, but we'll talk about not just this van. What events do you plan to attend in 2024? Maybe we can either see one of your cars in action, or maybe we just see you and talk to you about some of these cool vans.
So let's see. Obviously, shootout. I've started going to the shootout since 1996 was my first shootout, and I think since then I only missed maybe 3 shootouts. So I try to make those events almost always with my cars, be it the Spider, the van, the TR7. Always try to bring my car. There is I do like Radwood events. I don't know how much you're familiar with it. Radwood, it's cars from the 80s and 90s,
okay,
which obviously DSMs fit very well in that time frame. So unfortunately, the Radwood event, they've only been once in New England, and they haven't been back since. There are other rad groups that are starting up in the area, so I'd like to hit those events just because my interest of cars, overlap with pretty much anything from that era.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's going to be Old Mitsubishi show, I think mod Mitsubishi Day.
Yeah.
Mitsubishi, they have an event coming up in Hartford in a couple of weeks. So I think Hartford is a bit of a drive for me, about an hour and a half. But I think I'll do that. I'll take a drive down there. Other than that, I usually hit all the Import Wars events. Not Import Wars, the IFO.
Yeah. Love those.
I went to one last New England Dragway had it this past May, and there's going to be another one coming up in October.
Oh, nice.
And to assure my attendance, unfortunately, the May event got rained out, so I got a rain check for October. So that's how committed I am to it. Now I have to. I mean, I got a free pass to it. But yeah, so these are a few events that are coming up. I'm planning on attending.
Okay. Well, Leon, where can people find and follow you on social media so they can check out this Triumph and your van and some of your other cars?
Well, I am on I'm on the Facebook. I'm a little bit stingy with friending people just because I don't want to have a huge following of people like that. Instead, what I do is the New England DSM. That is a club that I started and ran since the mid-90s, and we're still around. It's actually probably one of the last remaining regional Club DSM affiliates.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of old school guys, a lot of names you would recognize. They're all there. It's a relatively small group, but we definitely accept people, and a lot of my friends are communicate with me through that. And there's also, obviously, as I mentioned, Summit Tuners, or we expanded the name. It's Summit, LRV, Chariot. We tried to put a lot of names there so people would find us, but basically it's a Summit Tuners. That's the base group name. Those are probably the best groups to find me on. I am on the Instagram, but not super active on it.
I got you.
I'm trying to get into it a little more.
I'll put a link to the group in the podcast details. That way, maybe some more people can find.
Yeah, if you can put the New England DSM and the Summit. I'll just stick it to Summit Tuners, but we kind of had a poll, and it was really getting out of control with because the variance of this van varied so much from market to market.
Mm.
And then of course people from other markets would come in like, hey, if you want people from Indonesia, you want to put this name there. So it grew. So it's not a catchy name, but again, we wanted to be welcoming to all people from all over the world.
Gotcha.
And that's why the name got a little carried away.
Well, finally, Leon, I give people a chance to give a thanks or a shout out to anybody who's helped them out along the way, helped them get their car where it is. Is there anybody that you want to give a thanks or a shout out to?
Well, primarily the New England DSM. It's a amazing club. We've had people who've long has moved on, no longer have DSMs. They're still in the club. They still like to talk about it, and so it's been a great source of support for many of us. As shops, gotta mention Force Performance. Robert's been an amazing pioneer and really a cheerleader of this platform. He's still making us parts, and definitely a great guy, and not no one specifically. For local guys, Kevin Jura, he was started out being New England guy, even though he's out in Midwest now. So he's always been big support. As was, I don't know if you know, Doug Elfman. He was another old-timer DSMer, but primarily local guy. But that's about it.
Okay. Well, Leon, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and I hope that some people learn some things about those cool vans, and maybe we can even inspire some people to get out there, maybe get in max effort, or maybe even, do something cool to their van.
Yeah, that would be great. And looking forward to seeing people at the shootout. It's always great gathering, and one of the best things. Year after year, you see same people show up, and
yep.
It's really no other event like that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Leon, once again, thank you for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Josh.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.